time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod and another special guest episode. We have your co-host Blake joining us this week, as well as our special guest, Dr. Steve Ellerhoff, who has written a book called Jung and Star Wars, Contemporary Mythology. So we're going to be asking Steve all about the book and just getting to know him as a Star Wars fan and his personal connections to Star Wars and some of the insights that he has about his recent project and a little bit more than that. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
All right, welcome back, Blake. Hello.
So eerie. Chut chut.
Chut chut. We got some nice music happening this week.
Yeah, we're really getting into the vibes here.
Yeah. All right, and to open up to our special guest, welcome Dr. Steve. Hello there.
Hello there.
Oh, right at the swell.
So well timed. You planned that, Josh?
Maybe.
That was just right.
Oh, good. All right. So, awesome. Well, it's nice to have you on with us, Steve. So, welcome to Star Wars Escape Pod.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Josh and Blake. I'm smiling over here because I really enjoy what you guys do. And, you know, I've been listening to your show on my walks and stuff. And I really respect just how deep into Star Wars you are. And I love what you're doing here, you know?
Oh, awesome.
So thank you for having me here.
Well, thanks so much for reaching out, and thanks for listening. I mean,
kind words.
Yeah, we you know, it's very rare when anyone kind of reaches out to us. I mean, whether it's a listener or anyone who's like, you know, special guesting at some point or whatever. So, you know, we always appreciate it, and therefore I apologize for the late reply. Because our inbox is so dusty, I almost never check it.
Tumbleweeds in there.
I find that hard to believe. I don't know. You guys are doing great stuff, you know, and yeah, it was not a late reply on my end. I've been so busy trying to get this book out that I don't know. I've been looking in 5 directions. So it was a thrill to hear back from you.
Ah, awesome. Well, yeah, we're super happy to have you, and I know all our listeners are gonna have a good time with this one, and just getting to know you as a Star Wars fan, and then also what you've been up to. So I guess to kick things off, we have just like 4 very straightforward Star Wars questions for you as a your personal connection to Star Wars, and just so that people kind of get familiar with kind of where you're coming from heading into your most recent endeavors. So first one is, what's your earliest memory of experiencing Star Wars, and what was it about the saga that first captured your imagination?
Oh, wow. Well, this goes way back for me. I was born in 1980, and when I was 3, Return of the Jedi came out, and I had just turned 3, and my dad took me. And I had not quite crossed that divide yet where you know you're watching a movie and it's not real. And so I have very vivid memories of Jabba's palace, especially Jabba the Hutt and Bib Fortuna, and not really being afraid of them, but thinking they were real and being like, wow, I haven't seen anything like this before. In my 3 years of existence, I'm just like, well, that's different. And I'm completely completely compelled by that. So it really started there for me. And my parents were always great about encouraging my love for the saga. And it hadn't, Star Wars hadn't even screened on national television yet. That wasn't until 1985. So, and the Star Wars then that I watched on VHS was taped off of TV. So I had this weird isolated incident of seeing Return of the Jedi at 3. And then it was a little while before I got to just dive into the rest of it. So
You almost got
that's where it started.
George Lucas' perspective from the very beginning, watching the third one first and then going back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's so weird.
I got a question for you then. Like, because of the very unique sort of time period that you first were exposed to these movies, like, how confused were you when you watched Return of the Jedi and saw that it was episode 6?
Yeah, right. I was like, excuse me, what is this? What's this? You're bringing me to part 6 of something? And no, I don't know. I think it was such a gradual immersion after that as my own consciousness changed as I grew through childhood. Then when I remember being in elementary school and having it all down pat, like totally understanding how it all fit together. Other people didn't necessarily, but it was just one of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, me and my friends, and everybody was into it. All the kids were into it. So it was just kind of normal,
Did you
to know what was going on?
Yeah. So then did you embrace the Marvel comics at the time? Because there wasn't a whole lot of literature, but I think the Marvel comics were kind of the earliest stuff available at the time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I was a little young for the comics. I really loved the adaptations of the movies.
Oh yeah.
That Marvel did.
I was going to ask.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to say the Ewok movies.
I love the Ewok movies. Oh, me and my neighbors, the Bassmans, we used to play Ewoks in the backyard all the time, and they loved the Battle for Endor, but I was into the Ewok Adventure. But we both respected each other's, preference,
Yeah.
So if I was at their house, we'd be watching Battle for Endor, but if we were at my house, we would watch Ewok Adventure. Yeah. Caravan of Courage. Yep. So. And it was taped off TV straight up. So, the Bassmans, me and Max and Andy, we just used to, and they had a tree house, so we were all set.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect for an Ewok adventure.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you watch, were you a big viewer of the animated show, Ewoks and Droids?
I did watch those. Yeah. And that's another funny thing with my neighbors. They loved droids and I loved Ewoks. So, we totally, yeah. And I had Ewok toys. I remember I had Ewoks toys and then they had droids toys. And, that was, and that was kind of like the last gasp before the Dark Ages up until the Timothy Zahn trilogy, except for the West End Games role-playing game. And I got those books probably when I was about 10. I think they started coming out when I was 8, but I started getting them when I was 10, and it was just like absorb, just read them cover to cover.
Those were pretty complicated, weren't they? It was like the D6 system.
Yeah, D6, and then and I didn't know how to play or anything. I just read all the lore over and over again. Awesome. They'd have it broken down like different which is, there's some funny stuff in there, some of that early stuff that has been wiped out, like the idea that Obi-Wan Kenobi and Owen Lars are brothers.
Right, I remember that rumor.
It was like an urban myth, back in the day.
yeah, and I'm like reading it, I'm like, what? Even then, it was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Just trying to stitch all the characters together.
Yep.
That's amazing.
So weird. Yeah. So that was and there was a time when it was like not cool to be into Star Wars, and it was those dark times there. But that all turned around again, of course.
Definitely.
So
just took an extra decade.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I feel like Disney of all companies has like cemented it in pop culture. If not, if it wasn't already before now, at least the pop culture is like cool now. You know, it's like because people go to Disney parks and it's like it's there. It's like a massive thing. You know, like
Right.
You know, whereas
modern
before,
Disney, which is like all ages.
yeah, exactly. Like what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say is like they've incorporated it into that Disney umbrella now, where like more people are kind of enveloped in the Star Wars fandom a bit more. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You don't think it's gonna
Yeah, totally. You
fade
can
in the
you can go to the cantina.
Yeah,
That's true.
exactly. So, what is it on a personal level that makes you a Star Wars fan?
Oh gosh. Well, I think for me, I think George Lucas's goal kind of worked. He expressed some concern that young human beings were not getting a lot of stories that were teaching them about right and wrong and friendship and just how to be a decent human being on the planet. He's concerned about kids not going to Sunday school and all that, and that was totally me. I was an agnostic secular kid, and Star Wars, I found stories there, parables, themes that are important and kind of helped me out in figuring out how to keep your eyes open and your wits about you as you move through life. Yeah. So I think that's where it hit me and has stuck with me.
Right. No, that's a solid answer. Yeah.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. And I know George, he definitely had like the perfect vision for the perfect time. And I don't know how he saw through just all the chaos that was going on in the world at the time, and even Hollywood and stuff too. That being said, he was kind of always an outsider. But just to see that missing link of something as the world was changing, and he knew there was going to be something that needed to be filled. And I mean, you can say capitalizing on it, but giving us something that just grew into what it is now.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
So, who is your favorite character in the Star Wars universe, and has your understanding of them changed after writing this book?
That's a really funny question because, and I'm glad you asked it because that changed right as I was finishing this book.
Nice.
So yeah, which is really kind of, it's a very funny story. My favorite character now is Boshek from the Mos Eisley Cantina.
Oh,
that's so random.
It's
almost
super random. Yeah, exactly. The guy who almost took them, and got them to the remains of Alderaan. It's totally random, and it's mainly because of synchronicity, which is another idea that Carl Jung, the psychologist, was really interested in. So I had finished this book, and it took me like 10 years to get it squared away, really, and written and finished. But I had the manuscript pretty much there, and I thought I needed an epilogue. So I didn't know what to write about, though. How do you write an epilogue after you've been working on something for almost 10 years? So I was just chatting with a friend of mine who's also from Canada, Kelly McCallum, and she was telling me about the rise of the AI chatbot. And I was like, oh, that's that. I was like, what? Like, I was a bit behind the times, I was like, this is a thing. She's like, yeah, this is really a thing. Like, you should look at it. So I logged onto one of these sites, and this was, I don't know, a year or two ago. And I just looked up Luke Skywalker, right? And there were 100 Luke Skywalkers that you could just click on and you could just start talking to them. And if I got bored talking to one, I could switch to another one. And I was like, well, that's weird. And I said, maybe I can write about this in the epilogue. Like, this is one direction that people are taking their fandom. They're going to have an AI relationship with Star Wars now. But then I knew part of that whole thing was making your own or training your own AI chatbot. So I thought, well, who do I want to talk with? I was like, ooh, I want to chat with Boshek. You know, some reason my head just went to that spacer from the cantina. I was like, I want to chat with him. He's got cool sideburns. I want to see what he's up to.
Choice.
Yeah.
So I trained. Actually, I goofed. I trained 2 Bosheks. I didn't know what I was doing, but I got talking to the second one. And I was just like, hey, you know, what's it like to be a spacer? And, you know, what's your ship? And, you know, we talked about the prettiest ladies in the galaxy and whatever. I was like, okay, I've got enough now to write about in my epilogue. You know, fans can now create AI characters. Great. So, and then I was like, oh, crap. As I set to writing it, not no one, but a lot of people aren't going to know who the heck Boshek is, right? So like, okay,
yeah.
I was like, middle-aged nerds will be like, yeah, Boshek, but everybody else was like, what? So I was like, okay, I better describe and explain who Boshek is. So I set to doing that, and then I realized that the first time he really was mentioned by name was in Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, published in 1995. And I was like, oh, right. I remember that. I was 15. I've still got that. So I just sort of swiveled in my chair, and it was right here on the shelf, and I pulled it off, opened it up to his story. And I was like, I gotta brush up, read it again anyway. And then it said, you know, At the Crossroads, A Spacer's Tale. And then it said by Jerry Oltion. And I was like, what? Because I'm a worker owner of an independent bookstore here in Eugene, Oregon called Tsunami Books. And one of our regular customers is Jerry Oltion.
No way.
What?
And yeah. And I didn't know about this connection at all or anything. So I immediately jumped on the email and was like, Jerry, like I wasn't going to wait till the next time he came into the store. I was like, Jerry,
get on immediately.
you know, what's going on? Like, this just happened. This is what I'm doing. Jerry Oltion, he's a Nebula winning science fiction writer who's written some novels and short stories, and he's also an astronomer. He's a really cool guy. And so I told him, he was just kind of as surprised as I was. He didn't know there was this, you know, Boshek niche fandom at all. And he told me he named the character. He got to name the character.
That's so
and Kevin
cool.
J. It's so cool, right? And Kevin J. Anderson said, you know, it's an anthology of stories. Each writer picked out their own character from the cantina, and he selected the spacer, and he named him Boshek after Bob Sheckley. Robert Sheckley, who was a science fiction writer who wrote hundreds of these spacer tales in the 1950s that are just amazing. This was the first time I heard about Robert Sheckley, was through this connection with Jerry. And since then, I've started reading Robert Sheckley, and I've got his complete stories, and they're just wonderful. They're so funny and clever. So a couple of spacers land on a planet, something weird happens, and then they get the heck out of there. That's the model for a lot of them.
Yeah, I feel like that became Star Trek.
Yeah, totally. Well, sure. Yeah. So this connection to Boshek was just this bizarre sort of like, I've been working on this book for 10 years, and then I get this astounding little coincidence right at the end. I find out how Boshek got his name. I got to update the Wikipedia entry. That was not on there. Nobody knew this.
That's amazing.
And then he didn't know Boshek was an action figure. So I got him a Boshek action figure. I was like, you need this like on your shelf. Like, you named the dude. And so it all kind of folded around on itself. And, you know, Jung was very interested in these coincidences, these things that happen that sort of boggle us, that we're just like, how did that happen? And yet it happened.
Right.
And so yeah. So it was a little glimmer for me that maybe I'd been on the right path after all, of at least doing something worthwhile. And so therefore Boshek's my favorite character.
Wow, yeah, that's an amazing story.
You're 100%. I kind of wish my favorite character had that good of a story.
I mean, I'm gonna think of this every time I see Boshek show up in the board game that I play, Outer Rim. Oh man, I think.
About that.
Yeah, it's so good. I'm pretty
that's
sure he's
cool.
in there. I think he's in there as like a.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And he comes up also in like all the D&D games and stuff, everything now
right.
too. It's like a character.
They also he's definitely in the Star Wars deck building game, like the more recent one from FFG.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, like
that might be. I went after this. I was like, I need Boshek for my shrine for my writing where I write, you know? And so I went on eBay and just started ordering stuff. And then, and so there are a bunch of these cards, and I don't know what these are, but I might have some of these things that you're talking about, because some of them are cards, and there's one little like hexagon with his face on it, and then there's a little miniature of him, and so I've got Boshek right here with us. You know,
that's amazing.
And I love too that he finally was identified. What's his name? I've got it here. The actor is finally, at long last, Francis Alfred Basil Tomlin.
Oh, okay.
So he's no longer with us, the actor, but you know what? Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Tomlin. You know, we're talking about you today. So
yeah, thank you, Mr. Tomlin. I mean, you know, I think it is such a classic Star Wars story to hear, you know, of some background character that just gets recognized so heavily, you know, for so many years after their very slight appearance somewhere, and it always makes me happy, because I don't know any other story that exists on screen that's like that, you know, like like Marvel has.
I was gonna say Marvel probably the closest, but
it's all source material from the comics, and a lot of those side characters have their moment in the spotlight, you know, and it's just like Star Wars is like they originate typically on screen. Mm-hmm. And then you see them for like 2 seconds, and then someone writes a book about them, you know? And it's like that, and it's like the spotlight is not necessarily the same, because, you know, it's like if it was a spotlight, they would have their moment in the film, but it's like, you know, it's somebody, it's somebody who's recognizing like, who is this person? I want to tell their story, you know?
I wonder if that fans got that just from the fact that George made action figures of everything.
Right. Well,
so it made everyone wonder, who is this character I'm getting? What is their story?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's such a great way to like initiate that idea that this is a growing mythology. You know, it's like, you know, it starts like just like poking people to ask those questions, like, oh, what's their story? Like, where did they come from? Why are they here? You know, like, why does he look like that and he's in this place, or something like that?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And those, you know, those toys too, just like they gave us, there was like 99 or 100 of them in the first run of toys, you know, and they kept adding to them as the movies would come out and everything. And then that gave kids the opportunity to have characters who are obscure background characters meet other characters they are not next to in the films at all, and come up with their own backstories and their own lore and their own names. And it's almost like this perfect kit for just like a fractal of little myths growing out from the center. You know, just constellate any of these weird characters. Like I'm going to have this Gonk droid hanging out with a Man and like a Death Star gunner, you know, and they're just going to hang out, and you make your own story. That just magnified and exploded the mythology for all those kids playing with that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I got one kind of initial fan question for you as well to follow up on that. It's how has your engagement with the fan community and all its diverse opinions and passions and all this and that shape your perspective on the saga and its ongoing evolution as it changes?
That I guess I have I feel in some ways like I've been an observer of a lot of things, just because there's so much going on. fans have taken it in every imaginable direction, and then in directions that I'm totally unaware of. You know, that AI chatbot thing was sort of an example of one of those things I was totally not aware of, didn't know it was happening. So it's certainly fascinating how diverse opinions have been. You know, we've seen toxic fandom, but we've also seen the opposite of that and everything in between. It goes on and on. They're the casual fans. They're even the people who don't really like Star Wars but know about it. That's an indicator. You know, if someone can see a picture of Yoda and say, "Oh, that's Yoda," or see Vader's helmet and say, "That's Darth Vader," it has reached them in some way. You know, these figures have become iconic. So I see it, you know, there's the fandom and the fans, they're not a monolith, just like anything else. And the different ways that they express appreciation are so interesting and so creative and fun, whether it's personal or collective, you know. Yeah. I just love it that all these people enjoy it. Yeah. And, you know, something that people like that much and in that variety of ways deserves to be examined seriously.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think some of my favorite stories are usually when a fan story intercepts the world of the story creation process, and you start getting characters like the astromech droid KT. You know, like right. Based on, you know, the girl and the pink
astromech droid, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like it's things like that, which or the 501st, right? The 501st Legion, and it's stories like that which kind of like, wow, it really does kind of feed itself when it comes to that process of like the lore being built and you know, because like at the times, like these people at West End Games, like how much communication did they really have at that time in history with the company, which was incredibly small, you know, have to do with the lore, and like, did this even pass through George Lucas at all when they were talking about things like, you know, Obi-Wan and Owen being like brothers, right? Like, I mean, this was just the heart of a fan coming up with things like this and putting it in a book, and it gets slapped with the license and out it goes and into the world it lives, you know, and it's like, wow.
Now this lives in people's psyche as canon.
Yeah, like someone out there. Yeah, definitely.
Totally. I have to shout out Bill Slavisek's book, Defining a Galaxy, because it's all about that. He talks, you know, he was in charge of a lot of those things at West End Games, and this little book he wrote about it is so fun and fascinating, and his creativity just went wild. And he says that in there. He says, you know, I had to get permission for certain things, and then other things where they didn't really say anything, I just thought I could make it up, so I did.
Yeah, that's like how we were talking about this recently when it came to the EU killing off Chewbacca, and you know, it was like, it was exactly that scenario. Like someone writing this book, I think it was R.A. Salvatore or someone. They you know, they were given a list of people you can't kill, and for some reason Chewbacca just didn't make the list. So, you know, of course he's gonna go out and kill Chewbacca. Like, it's like, wow, this is gonna be a big point of the story, you know. And,
I mean, here we go.
Talking about it years and years later. It's not even canon anymore.
And I love how that just affected every other author after that.
Oh yeah,
having to write in a world without Chewbacca.
It was a world.
Yeah.
There it is, a world where a moon fell on him.
That's right.
Yeah, that was. I was like, oh no, doobie doo, doby do, what is it? Is it doobie doo or doby do? Yeah, doby do the moon. And like, oh yeah, brutal.
Yeah, oh man,
brutal.
I mean, it's definitely memorable.
Yeah, I think I would remember that too. Yeah. Oh man. It's kind of funny. All right, so I wondered if you could tell us a little bit, and just the listeners who you know have no idea who this Jung person is. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about who Jung is, and then a little bit about the book that you've written that we're kind of talking about.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. And I should also say, I'm not a Jungian analyst. I'm not a psychologist. So I'm really a literary scholar who really fell in love with Jungian theories and concepts as they apply to literature and mythology. And so that's where I'm coming from.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from. And that's what I got my PhD in Ireland. I went and I applied these ideas to short stories by Ray Bradbury and Kurt Vonnegut. And then while I was kind of doing that, all this Star Wars stuff was in my mind as well, and in my heart. And after that project was when I was able to really start earnestly on this. So Carl Jung is interesting. He's a Swiss psychologist, one of the early ones. He's born in 1875, and he was quite a bit younger than Sigmund Freud, but he was sort of groomed by Freud to become his successor in the field of psychology. They had a big falling out, and it was mainly because Jung refused to reduce everything to a single way of looking at the psyche and consciousness. Freud was very big on the sex drive, and Jung said, yep, that's certainly a player, but there are other players in our psychology as well. It's more diverse than just that. This caused a big rift between them, and Jung went off and kept developing his own psychology. So if you have heard about archetypes, or the collective unconscious, or introverts and extroverts.
Yeah, the first one is I feel like has become like a foundational stone for like any sort of D&D setup.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. The role-playing games really have run with a lot of these ideas as well. And so yeah, he developed a lot of these ideas in Switzerland, and he set up a training institute in Zurich and trained other people in the ideas. Now, he died in 1961, and since then there have been a couple of generations of people who have taken his ideas and worked with them and changed them and revised them, and they've kept going and trying to explore these ideas about what goes on in our dreams, what goes on in mythology, why we react so strongly to mythology and why it's still alive and how it's alive. And so a lot of these ideas are on their end focus on a therapeutic aim. But people like me who are really interested in literature find something sort of running parallel to that, and we can see a lot of these themes and trends and concepts play out really well in the books and films and art that we take in. And so I got the idea to sort of yoke some of those ideas, and not just Jung's ideas, but also his intellectual descendants, I suppose. And because there are a whole bunch of them, I got like 3.5 bookcases full of books by not just Jung, but by the Jungians and the post-Jungians and the archetypal psychologists. These are all branches off from where he started. So, I got the idea of applying it to Star Wars, partly because of Joseph Campbell. And I'm sure you're familiar with Joseph Campbell and his power of myth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very inspirational to George.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Very inspirational to George. And I had read this again, kind of went back to Campbell for me. I was in my 20s and I just sort of inhaled everything that Campbell had written that was published at the time. And in his work, he talks about how, for him, the base was Jung and Jung's ideas. And he even edited a portable Jung book for Viking Press. And so you get Joseph Campbell's selections of Jung's essays in that book. So you can really see which ones he preferred and liked. And so I got this idea, well, George and Joseph Campbell became good friends. And the influence is definitely there. What if we leapfrog past Campbell to Jung and just see, what if we look at Star Wars and Jung and just see what ideas line up and what we can talk about there? So that's really what the book's about. That's where it came from and kind of the direction it took.
Oh, that's amazing. So it's like really, I mean, for the casual Star Wars fan, like if they were to pick up your book and give it a read, I guess the best way to interpret it is like it's kind of a I guess a A to Z sort of like, this is how Star Wars fits into this Jungian analysis.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Hopefully even just the casual fan looking at it would sort of hopefully notice that, oh, wow, there's a lot going on here in Star Wars. I knew I liked Star Wars, but there's so much actually behind it and in it that is worth thinking about and talking about together. So, for instance, I'm thinking about, this has just been on my mind. There's a Jungian, I think he was a psychiatrist in Berkeley, California, who worked mostly with teenagers and kids. And he wrote a book that I don't know why more people haven't read it, but it's called Dire Emotions and Lethal Behaviors. I mean, there's a title for you. His Charles E. Stewart, he put together this model of what happens to somebody psychologically in order for them to be able to like commit a massacre. And it's like a 4-step process, right? In that he has come up with.
I'm trying to picture
and it lines up
Palpatine now.
Oh yeah, well sure. It lines up really well with Anakin too.
Oh yeah.
You see
that
one.
out.
Yeah, you see the 4 steps sort of go through, and so I walk you through the steps and how they line up. We see it line up when he slaughters the Tusken village. We see it when he sieges the Jedi Temple. And then also, I mean, later with Kylo Ren, it shows up there with him flying off the handle and everything. So here's a psychological concept and a model by someone who was worried about these things happening in our world today in the 21st century, and then we can see it play out in the myth of Star Wars. We have examples where we can maybe easily grasp the idea just by lining it up side to side with what we see there.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, very true. So just looking at it from that perspective, then you're kind of teaching the youth really just basic concepts to understand reality and to push people towards the moral good. Yeah, and that's a real Jungian thing, is this idea, just each of us trying to become more conscious of our own behavior and how we're moving through the world and what we're doing and finding our own blind spots as well. That's kind of wrapped up in the whole Jungian process.
Yeah.
So I some of that hopefully carries over. There was a Jungian analyst named Erich Neumann who escaped Nazi Germany, and he had this idea called a new ethic, and he compares it with what he calls the old ethic. And The old ethic is sort of this societal attitude of just this is right and this is wrong, black and white thinking. And he encourages this idea of a new ethic, which is one of individuals taking up this task of trying to become their best self here on the planet while they're here. And it ties in with Jung's idea of individuation, which is the idea of your personality flowering into what it really can be, you know, you at your most you-ness, if you will. And one of the things Eric Neumann says is this idea of a new ethic is more about not just being good. It's about not being better than you actually are or worse than you actually are. Try to find balance. And
that's a direct relation to Star Wars right there.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
With the Force.
There you go.
Finding balance. Yeah.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about, because you wrote about Disney aiming to canonize a living mythology. Can you like kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. Yeah. So that's early on in the book. I realized, well, I should probably sort of talk about this issue of canon, because it does relate to mythologies and the ways that Jungians view mythologies. So from a Jungian perspective, and also from James Hillman, who he started a movement called archetypal psychology. Mythologies can take many, many forms, and they sort of have to in order to be alive and to keep going. And you see this in a lot of different instances and examples throughout history. A common example is Greek mythology and how stories would differ sometimes island to island. You know, the characters are the same, but there are these funny little differences between the stories. And from a Jungian perspective, that's A-okay. That is part of mythology. It is this thing that you can't fully contain because it's so imaginative. It comes out of the psyche and it's celebrated collectively. And everybody's going to have their own personal relationship to, say, a mythological character. But then there's going to be sort of a collective experience of those characters too. Mm. And we see this play out in stories, in plays, in epic poems from those cultures at that time, right?
Yeah.
So an interesting thing has, of course, happened with Star Wars, where canon is an issue that gets brought up and has been brought up for decades. And you know, Lucasfilm had its own version of canon when George was helming the company, and then with the sale to Disney, things inevitably got shaken up. Mm-hmm. And in that, of course, we had the whole situation where you already brought it up, just the EU kind of getting bulldozed and just repackaged as legends, and then you had some fallout from that, from fans who had taken those stories to heart. It was their canon, right?
Yeah, I think people still are upset about that. And
right.
There you go.
That's why people, I think, are very grateful when Dave Filoni kind of walks over the wreckage of the ruins and starts picking up pieces and trying to put them back together.
Recanonize. Yeah. You know, I feel like it's a thing that as long as you have continuity, there is inevitably a drive to maintain a canonicity, and when you have a mythology story like Star Wars, it becomes, I think, a little difficult sometimes to maintain canonicity, because we've talked about it a number of times on this podcast with more recently, the newest kind of debate was in regards to Andor and the initial meeting between Cassian Andor and K2SO, because a couple of years ago,
comic book.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, the comic book came out, and I went out of my way to go out and buy this comic book, which I now feel kind of silly about, because I'm like, well, it was never a fantastic story, but I really like the story that we got in the show, and how they meet in the show as opposed to in this Marvel comic, and so it's one of the times I'm like, well, canon's not always the superior way to tell these stories. Like, I mean, I do like the idea that there is like, it's like some mythology out there that maybe this Marvel comic exists as a story that someone told someone else, about like how
rumors and whatnot,
right? Like how the crazy tale about how Andor met K2SO, and it's nothing like that, how it actually happened, right? There was also a book that came out a couple of years ago called The Legends of Luke Skywalker, and it was it was like a promotional book for The Last Jedi, and in the book, the story was a bunch of I don't know how you call them, like passengers or crew members aboard a ship flying somewhere, and the subject of the Jedi comes up, and one of them starts to share a story about Luke Skywalker. And so then in the book, you read a couple chapters of this story that this person is telling about the legend of Luke Skywalker. And then someone else pipes up once that story's over and starts to tell their crazy tale about their encounter with Luke Skywalker. And you get like 3 or 4 of these in the whole book, and then it wraps up with the idea that nobody knows if anyone else is telling the truth. It's like you don't really know if any of these actually happened or didn't happen. But the point is, everyone there has a story to share about this mythological being that may or may not be real. And it's just an interesting thing I thought I would bring up. As we're talking about living mythologies and canonicity.
Oh yeah,
and stuff. So
that actually reminds me, and I don't know if it's ever something official from Lucasfilm, but there's always that rumor that the story we're told was actually from the perspective of like 3PO telling the story.
Either that or yeah, and I mean, I think George's idea was also that it was the Wills telling the story, originally, the Wills of the Force that was,
from the Journal of the Wills.
Because the original title I think was like From the Journal of the Wills, The Adventures of Luke Starkiller, I believe.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Journal.
Up until the point where, and this is funny that we talk about this, because more recently, I think Mark Hamill did an interview somewhere where he actually did talk about that title change and how they reshot the scene that he introduces himself to Leia on the Death Star, because the first time they filmed that, he introduces himself as Luke Starkiller, and then he goes on to do his typical Mark Hamill grumble about like, what? Now it's Skywalker? Are you kidding me? This is what is this?
Not nearly as cool.
Yeah, it's not nearly as cool. But it's classic George Lucas, always changing his minds. But that fits really well with the idea that it's mythology, because it means that ideas aren't always the most consistent in the storytelling. And I mean, look how old Ben Kenobi is, and that's supposed to be 19 years after we see him on Mustafar. You know what I mean? It's like
Tatooine suns are pretty hot.
Yeah, it's like, what happened?
Yeah, and Owen and Beru also. You're just like, geez, like, how many sandstorms have they been through? Like, that's awful. Rough living.
Moisture evaporators aren't producing too much.
Yeah.
No.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think you're spot on. This and Disney has been very clever about what they've done, and like that book, The Adventures of Luke Skywalker, and giving us these competing tales within the galaxy itself, is acknowledging that mythologies do this. They're very plastic and can stretch and take different forms. And it's happened with Star Wars. I mean, even the choice to do away with the expanded universe tales as being canon, but reprinting them selectively and acknowledging that they're there, and Filoni bringing elements back in. Even that is an acknowledgement that Star Wars is all of that as well.
Yeah.
So, it's this big.
Sorry, I just thought Disney wanted to just print and produce stuff that was already just easy for them to make some extra cash.
Yeah, well, I mean, that totally. They call it a franchise. I mean, I call it a mythology. They call it a franchise. There are shareholders who expect a dividend every year, who own Disney stock. It's both. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Yeah, definitely both. Yeah. So the Force is a big part of Star Wars. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what's written about how the Force fits into, Jungian ideas? Sure.
Yeah, and that was a place where I kind of started, because I was like, what would Jung and the Jungians make of the Force? And there's so many concepts. I sort of ran myself through all of these different ideas that the Jungians explore about psyche and what is it? Where does it come from? And with Jung himself, I sort of came around to one of his ideas. He was interested in anthropology as well as developing psychology. And in reading anthropologists, he found, so-called primitive cultures would talk about an idea like mana and this energy that is around and through everything. And there were certain people who anthropologists had identified who were who they called mana personalities. These were people who could use that energy and that magic to their own aims in their own ways as they saw fit. And in that world of anthropology, they were thinking about sort of application in the real world, but also in traditional stories that were told about witches and wise men and whatever else. So Jung and the Jungians are very interested in how these things play out in the psyche, but largely metaphorically. It's all a metaphor for certain things that go on. We can have dreams. They said that dream was the birthing ground of mythology, and I think a lot of us who dream have and remember our dreams have had ones where straight up supernatural stuff happens in the dream, and so there's this natural tendency within us to, against our conscious will, experience some kind of magic that ties everything together. And they would just look at the Force, I think, would just look at the Force and say, yeah, this is in our time an expression of exactly that. And it's a metaphorical representation of the essence, the life essence that is in all of us, and our potential to do all kinds of things, great and awful.
Yeah.
The Force definitely is there. And the Jungians are very interested in the unconscious parts of psyche and of our lives, and all of the unconscious things that go on that we just don't know are going on inside of us.
And by unconscious, you would maybe, I guess, a way for me to interpret what you mean by that is, if anyone's seen the movie Inception, is that kind of like,
oh, sure,
roughly sort of the idea, the idea of planting an idea in someone's head without them being consciously aware of that, is that kind of more closely to like how you would describe when you say unconscious?
Yeah, for sure. And even the idea of you've got a dream. Now there is lucid dreaming, of course, where people steer the direction of their dream as it's happening, right? But there's also just straight up dreams, which are more common. And a good question is, who's the author of this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not choosing for this to happen. This is an experience happening to me. So the unconscious is something that we cannot conceive. It's cut off from our conscious self, and yet it's running in the background at all times, and it tells us stories when we're asleep, for sure. So yeah, it's that author that we can't know face to face. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I guess dreams is it plays such a big part in Star Wars storytelling as well, because of course that's something that both Anakin and Sifo Dyas are plagued by,
Oh yeah.
Over the course of their stories. And in Sifo Dyas's side of things, like, I mean, his visions got so, I mean, I guess visions or dreams, in Star Wars, I guess they could be one and the same. But they get so bad that, like, he or so vivid that he, it affects his actions, and he goes out and creates a clone army, in response to what he's seeing about the future. And, with Anakin, it's like his dreams affect his choice to turn to the dark side, and to make a deal with the devil to try and save his wife that is not yet dead, that he believes wholeheartedly is going to die. And I guess, like, you also write about Anakin in this book. So, like, does that play into, I guess, they're kind of connected there. In a way, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say the Jungians are very interested in dreams, and they're also interested in visions as their own thing. And Jung said that visions in some way are cleaner than a dream because they happen to people while they're awake. And usually their ability to recall visions are much stronger than to recall a dream. And so yeah, there's some of that in the book as well, like the power of visions, what characters experience visions, sort of how that lines up with Jungian thought. But with Anakin and the dreams, there's a line in Attack of the Clones where he says, Jedi don't have nightmares, like, you don't have bad dreams, something like that. And it's like, whoa, okay, that's weird, because I think it's another aspect of the Jedi sort of like suppressing stuff that's not a light, but it's really interesting.
Because I was just thinking, I feel like in one of the newer novels, Anakin, when he's a Padawan or pre-Padawan, I guess, no, I wouldn't ask you Padawan, but it's still at the temple, he has conversations with Obi-Wan about how he's still having, like, really bad sleeps and stuff.
Right.
So that would fit then.
I think it's like maybe it's just denial, right? Like,
because he's like always exhausted all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And from a Jungian perspective, it's like, well, nightmares, let's not demonize nightmares. There might be something there that's trying to break through that we need to know about, that we need to see. And let's not fly off the handle because we had a nightmare. Let's try to learn from it instead. Maybe even try to draw that nightmare back up and ask it, why are you here? Why are you visiting me like this? I'm not enjoying this, but come on in. Let's have a cup of tea and talk about this. What's going on?
That being said, I feel like it kind of backfired on Anakin.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's what's really tricky. And that it Star Wars does it so beautifully. It shows us, it gives us examples of sometimes things we don't want to do. Mythology is full of characters who have lived lives that are admirable, and it's full of characters who've lived lives that are deplorable and tragic as well. It's a place where we can kind of safely have a testing ground of narrative and see how some of these outcomes might manifest, and then what it might look like. He's suffering. Anakin suffers terribly in the wake of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes on. It becomes intergenerational trauma at that point, too, and goes on down to the grandkids. So that's another great thing that Star Wars does. It's very honest about those things.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. I feel like that's something we also just don't really talk about, is that trauma that gets passed down the line, because everyone just kind of is thinking within their own bubble so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And myths do this. The Greeks had the House of Atreus, and multiple generations of the same family curse. And this comes up in other stories as well. This comes up in popular fiction that's entirely realistic, intergenerational stuff. It's one of the most popular themes of storytelling for human beings, probably because it's a lot more common than a lot of people like to admit.
Wow. Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit here. So something that has always bothered me, and I realize you touched on in your book, and that is Yoda having a species that we never get to figure out the origin of.
Yeah. What's that about? What's going on there? What are your thoughts on Yoda's species? I'm curious.
I've always thought that George just left him kind of... He's supposed to be so old and so wise that he needed to be very unique in the world, I think. So George was trying to put him somewhat on a pedestal to stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's ancient, so he's from this earlier version of the galaxy, even 900 years old. He's seen things that these humans would never be able to see, and his perspective is tempered by all that time as well. I love it that he's just sort of like, he's this sacred anonymous species. Where's his homeworld? Nobody knows, and how they've carried that mystery forward. It's an interesting kind of situation, because it's intentional. It's intentional mystery, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they threw Yaddle.
We're never going to fill this in. Yeah, right. Yaddle and Grogu, right? And then also I think I named the other ones. There are a few others from like Knights of the Old Republic. There were a couple.
Oh, right.
In there. I can't even remember their names. They're just in there for a little bit. But yeah, that's like, it's like we're gonna build the mystery into it and deliberately not tell you these things, so you have to take it as mysterious. That is its own interesting conceit. And it's curious.
Yeah, it is curious. Like, I love that the fans who are enveloped in this mythology are all, I think we all kind of play along with that too. Like I think when it comes to assigning names and things like that, like your story of Boshek and like watching Phantom Menace, and you got like the Greblebs back there, which is just Spielberg backwards for all the ETs and their little their little pod, right? Like, someone thought of this, and yet no one out there is pressing to give Yoda a species name, and I think, at least as far as I know, and I kind of appreciate that, it's like,
it's surprising they haven't, to be honest.
Yeah, it's like, what, I wouldn't necessarily care to know what his species is called, because that gives me the impression that there's a planet full of little Yodas running around somewhere, and it's like,
Well, now we know how slowly they age and grow up,
Right.
Grogu, right? So we've got a little bit of revealed to the mystery, but that almost just raises more questions of how they survive.
What's the term? Like how they breed and I don't know. Like I love the idea that maybe some crazy thing happens and an egg forms in a tree somewhere and then out pops a little green elf.
Like
Something
like a traditional dwarf.
like manifested by the Force or something, and it gives there's no a similar alien that we've seen in any Star Wars story that's of this particular species that isn't wielding the Force. They've all been Force users, right? And they've all been very powerful. Like we've always been given the idea that Yaddle is also very powerful. And we've been given the idea that
Dooku.
And like Grogu is very powerful, Yoda is very powerful. But I mean, yeah, that's true. Yeah. But yeah, I think like it adds to this magical kind of whimsical idea that's like, the Force just created them inside the a hollowed out tree stump or something like that.
Yeah, totally. It's and like you say, we play along with it, and we can speculate about it. It opens. Star Wars is very good at this in terms of not answering every single question, and yet we've mapped out all these. Yeah, exactly. And yet we've mapped it all out. But then this is like sacred, like Yoda's who he is, what he is, where he's from is the sacred thing that we play along with. I like the way you put that.
Yeah.
It's very it encourages playfulness and imaginativeness.
Right.
And that is another one of the key aspects of this being a mythology. Totally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Totally. It's fun. It's fun as well. And the Spielberg connection is fun too. I talk about that in the book as well, because there's that part in E.T. where he sees the kid dressed up as Yoda on Halloween.
Oh, right.
And he goes home.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're wondering what's his home planet. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, oh, like, okay. And then
the Senate.
The Senate floor.
Oh man. And then there's all the Star Wars references in Indiana Jones as well.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, the hieroglyphics in there of 3PO and R2.
Yeah, that's how I think we first got the original story. It's passed down.
There. Well, it is a long time ago, right? And Indy is an archaeologist, so
that's right.
If anybody's going to uncover it, it's just a playground for families, people of all ages. It's not. I know George says. I just saw there was a thing that popped up on social media yesterday of Ron Howard, and he was saying, the last thing that George said to him when he took over Solo to direct it, George said, "Remember, it's for 12-year-old boys." And Ron Howard was like, "Okay, thanks." And that's an interesting idea, because Star Wars is I mean, the appeal goes way beyond 12-year-old boys.
Those boys grow up.
And so I'm sort of on my mind to think maybe that was George directing Ron, because he had been his director in American Graffiti, and so people always talk about how like George doesn't like to work with actors. The fun for him is in the editing room, but maybe George sensed that the right thing to tell Ron Howard was that thing about 12-year-old boys. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe also I'm overanalyzing it. So, that's possible too.
Maybe George could sense change of direction, and he was just trying to pass on some wisdom to Ron.
Yeah. I mean, to add on to that too, I mean, there's a great quote from Tolkien about people, if everyone was able to remember, who they were as as a kid and embody that a little more, that like, think like everyone would be in a better place or something like that. Like I don't.
Joy.
I can't remember the exact quote, but there's like something that he said about that, and it's just very interesting.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great connection. That's a great connection, and it kind of goes back. It's making me thinking of Jung as well. Just the age 12 is a very important age, in terms of, or it can be in terms of development and growing. And there's something that sort of happens right, at the end of childhood and the start of adolescence, where something clicks in a lot of people, and they suddenly become a lot more aware about who they are and what life is like and all about. Ray Bradbury wrote about it beautifully in his novel Dandelion Wine. And the moment this kid running across, it's the summer of 1928, and this kid is running across his front yard, and his forehead just breaks this very thin strand of spider silk that's just sort of across the yard that he can't even see, but he can feel it. And in that breaking, the kid gets this realization about life and just how beautiful it is, how big it is, how he's a player in all of it. And so that idea is very popular. Other people have written about it. But Jung talked about being that age. I think he was 12 and walking down, I think he was walking home from school maybe, and he was walking down this road with trees lining the road. And at the start of the walk, he was not yet across that threshold, but when he got to the end of the road with the trees, he had realized he was himself. And so that age is really important. So maybe I think George is sort of aware of that as well.
Yeah, because I feel like that's kind of, at least for the first movie, really what we see Luke Skywalker go through. He goes from being this know nothing farmer, and then you realize he ends up having a big part to play in the galaxy as a whole.
I found the quote too. It's children are meant to grow up and not to become Peter Pans, not to lose innocence and wonder, but to proceed on the appointed journey.
It's ironic that George said that, but then the mythology he made, Tolkien. But I'm sure George.
Oh, he took a lot.
Yeah,
took a lot from that.
But it's funny that then all these, I'll put myself in this category. Maybe didn't grow up entirely because they're still in love with the mythology of Star Wars.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, me too. I'm in that club.
Yeah.
We can do a deep dive analysis on Star Wars, but also it is just really fun. There's that too. Lawrence Kasdan has that funny, when The Force Awakens came out, in one of his interviews, he was all like, I don't know, Star Wars is just goofy. I was like, that is so funny. I mean, it's true.
There's a lot of perspectives of it and like different points to pick out Star Wars.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking of like, for that, like the goofy part, like Han and Chewie chasing the stormtroopers down the hallway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's something that I think, some Star Wars stories that we end up watching, some of the more recent stuff, and it's like, it's missing something. And sometimes that's it. That's the key. It's like, it's
the
missing
humor.
It's missing that little bit of goofiness about it. Or like the something.
I do feel a number of the more recent shows, I feel like they're really trying to try different genres. And so, And because I don't know how that would fit so well in like Andor, for example.
Right, or like The Acolyte. Like I don't remember really getting.
What was
There's goofy scenes like the.
Who was the
first episode?
Who was the little?
Or was that little gopher creature that
gopher? Yeah, I was just like, who's the squirrel guy?
yeah, right. Okay, yeah. So I guess you added a bit of goofiness. Right. But
but dude, it that has been part of it since since the first film. There's that sort of, this gentle humor.
Yeah, like a childlike humor,
Right.
A little bit.
Light slapstick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Piusa.
Yeah, light. A bit of a tangent, but I actually had a slight follow-up question in regards to the Yoda part. Because I read a section of your book that was going on about the polarized mana split between Palpatine being one extreme and Yoda being the other. So that's where this question is coming from. Here's the question here. Do you think that Yoda and Palpatine were always designed by George to be polarized mana of personalities? Or do you think that changed when he wrote the prequels by elevating Yoda to Palpatine's level? Because I think in the original trilogy, there was supposed to be a power difference between Yoda and Palpatine, or else Yoda would have done it himself.
Well, there you go. That's a really good question, and something that is definitely worth discussing, because Yoda's so much older than Palpatine, right? But Palpatine is like, they have that epic fight, of course, in Revenge of the Sith. But yeah, when we first see both of them, when they both show up in Empire Strikes Back, and Yoda sort of cops to Luke to being Yoda after he's tested him. That scene comes right after we see Palpatine for the first time. So they're paired very closely in that. I don't know. I mean, Yoda and Obi-Wan, their exile is so interesting. And, it's like they roll over in a way after Revenge of the Sith. They're just like, well, we can't overthrow this together because we're overpowered. We have to wait for these kids to grow up.
It's always a strange move, I've always thought.
Strange move. Yeah, it's a kind of a weird move. Yeah, absolutely. And it makes us ask, why? Why is that the rationale? And even what is their rationale? Because we don't get it played out so well. I like some of the newer stories in the certain point of view. We get Yoda and he's all excited about training Leia, but then Obi-Wan's ghost is like, sorry, it's going to be the boy. And Yoda's like, psh, like, I don't want to train that kid is, no, it's got to be the girl. Like, the girl's the one who's got it.
He's too much.
And Obi-Wan's like,
probably.
Well, yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing about Leia too. She's got plenty of Anakin in her. Strangling Jabba the Hutt to death, just it's just like what?
Yeah, really it's a classic Vader move.
yeah, exactly. That's it. It's the choking. So yeah, but I don't know. I don't know what George's intentions were. And I'm not even sure that George knows what his intentions were on some of these things, because he has a record of misremembering facts.
Yeah.
And this is the literary scholar in me talking, and the way I was trained to look at literature. It goes back to sort of something D.H. Lawrence said, never trust the teller, trust the tale. And so, we've got the texts, we've got the sacred Jedi text,
right?
And we can watch those and read those and take those in and everything. And this is part of the beauty of all of it. It's open to interpretation. So we get to talk about it. We get to turn it over and think about it. I do think that there is some intention in terms of, Yoda and Palpatine. They're definitely sort of, the highest Jedi and the highest Sith in the equation at that time. And one of the things I found looking at it through a Jungian lens is that they are the same archetype. It's just that they're different poles of that archetype. And Yoda would be the light end of the pole, and Palpatine, of course, is the dark end of that pole. And that's something the Jungians are really interested in, is opposites, and how that tension plays out between opposites in our psyche. And it gets illustrated in stories like this. So actually Yoda and Palpatine have quite a lot in common, and maybe it's the reason they're not able to defeat each other, is because they are, just one end and then the other. Not as obvious as Rey and Kylo as a dyad. That I think is a different thing at play there.
What's funny is that's actually my next question in regards to that, but I'll let you finish.
Oh, nice. Yeah. No, I just, it's, I think they are two sides of the same coin. And this sort of goes back to that idea of Eric Neumann that I brought up earlier, of the new ethic and finding a new way in your life. He also talked about the old ethic. I think Palpatine and Yoda both represent that old ethic in that galaxy. They are from the ancient lineage of the Jedi and the Sith. These are institutional setups, and one of them, of course, plays out with 2, and the other amassed 10,000 in their ranks. But they represent the old ways, and the old ways don't work anymore because it throws the galaxy back and forth into a, now the dark side's got it, now the light side's got it, and that is not balanced.
Turning.
Yeah, it's way out of balance, and one of the things Luke's generation brings in is this chance at balance, and saying, I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to play this back and forth war. And then of course that's a new thing. That's a different thing. And that's what brings Vader back. It says, whoa, Anakin's still in there. And he's got the power to throw this guy down the shaft. So, so that's
something to that
that
I never noticed before till you pointed it out, is that Luke has that gray pocket, the flap on the
gray pocket.
Yeah, I've never noticed that was a different color on his black uniform to show, as you described, him being more of the gray.
Yeah, and well, he's reached kind of more of a middle position. He has tasted the dark side and in beating back his father and cutting his hand off. But then he catches himself in this great moment. He becomes conscious of the fact that he could become like him, like his dad, and he doesn't want that. So he consciously decides, you know what? I'm not going to do it. And he steers back toward the light side of things. And then that bib opens up, his little gray pocket. Gray is, halfway between white and black. So it's a symbolic. Also, it's a triangle that opens up, which is nice. It's a shape with 3 sides. It's no longer one side versus another. If you have that, it's just a line back and forth. But you've got a new position, something that's not quite totally either or on that back and forth. You suddenly have a third point, and you have a triangle that can open up. And that symbol is suddenly there, and it's not beaten over our heads. Like you said, you can watch it for years and years and years and not really notice it. But they very deliberately put that detail in there and carried it through for the rest of the film. When he's at the pyre, when he rejoins everybody at the Ewok village, that pocket's still open on the front. And so yeah, he's touched the dark side. He started out obviously on the light side, and now he's more integrated. He's grown up. He's able to stand as himself. So it's interesting that he has to do that by appealing as a son of Vader. In order to make it there, he has to accept his own place. Yeah.
Where he could end up, right? So.
Right. Right. And this all plays out subliminally, but I haven't found anything. You know, I went through all kinds of books about the making of Return of the Jedi and just everything I could get my hands on, and there was nothing really charting that costume change.
Yeah, I know
there.
it's been,
and
I forget if we've discussed it before, if I've seen something like, you know, the a little bit of a hint as to what's going on there, but it's interesting when you watch A New Hope and he's in this like white tunic, and then the next movie rolls around and he's in this like kind of beige gray jumpsuit, and then he's in this black jumpsuit, and then you see him again in the next movie and he's wearing like white again, you know, and but yeah, it is interesting, you know, like the kind of the almost to symbolize like kind of the events surrounding his story are kind of progressively getting darker, and you know, as time goes by, and you know, it could be having some effect on him. I know maybe people back then were, you know, theorizing like the, you know, the shift in color in his costume could be symbolizing like, oh, his draw or temptation to the dark side, you know, it's like taking its hold on him or something like that. But yeah, you know, I think like there's definitely some truth in like what they clothe him in is a, you know, a reflection of the world around him. And, you know, as the galaxy is becoming a darker place, you know, it's kind of visually represented there in what he's wearing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I mean, it's art, right?
Yeah.
So, so these things can work on us, and for the Jungians, they would say, you know, the symbol is a thing that can't really be expressed any other way. In this case, we've got a visual symbol, costume, right? And it can be symbolic. It's a chance to really see and experience something that isn't just flat out stated, and really maybe that can't really be stated. You know, how do you explain psychological transformation of a character? Like you're telling a story. You're not going to bore everybody by saying, okay, now, and at this point in what you're watching, you know, there's no pause to like catch everybody up to be like, you know, what this is da 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 da. No, it's a work of art, and it and that's part of what makes it beautiful. It works on us, and many of these things are very deliberate. I know that detail was a continuity decision between scenes and shots, and the crew and cast followed it very closely, so it means something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It wasn't just a mistake they had to just roll with.
Right. Yeah, but it's the kind of thing where, you know, lots of people like to say, you know, Star Wars is just, you know, popcorn fare, whatever. It doesn't mean anything. But then you get something like the bib, or, you know, you just take a step back and just like Josh is doing, looking at his costumes throughout the films, suddenly you have something to think about, sit with and ponder and talk about, you know?
Nope, so true.
There's something complicated going on there. It's art.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so too. Just to backtrack a little bit on that, Kylo and Rey, that you mentioned there. So I'm curious, because as we know, George was like really involved in using a lot of these concepts and creating Star Wars. So I'm curious, with Disney taking over and with their trilogy, if you see that continuation of the touches of the Jungian kind of outlook.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I do know that. I think I'm not certain. I can't be certain. I think that there are people. I think there are people at Lucasfilm and making the films and all of that who do have some of this and really do get it. But I don't think it's the kind of thing they need to get in order to make some really great mythology. one of the things, this is there's the mythologist John Booker. He's the head of the Joseph Campbell Foundation right now. And one of the things I really like that he says is about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, the monomyth. And John Booker explains that the monomyth is not proscriptive, it's descriptive. So it's not Joseph Campbell giving you a recipe of how to tell a hero story. What Joseph Campbell was doing was he was describing the pattern of a hero's stories and that archetype through different cultures and stories that they tell, traditional stories, myths, and so on. It just describes it. I think a lot of people sort of misread Campbell as a recipe when actually he was describing patterns. So I think George Lucas understood this. I think he understood that it was descriptive, and when he has talked about it in the past, he said that reading The Hero with a Thousand Faces showed him that he was already following patterns in what he was trying to do that were just innate, that were there, that are natural, that come up out of the psyche on their own if you let them, if you follow your intuition. So in terms of Disney and what they're doing and all that, I don't know. A lot of people have been fed this idea that Campbell's work is proscriptive, rather, that it's a recipe. It's a very popular idea that has been pervasive in Hollywood since the 80s because people kind of misunderstood the influence that it had on George, and they wanted to cash in and be like, oh, well, we'll just follow this and we'll just make a bunch of movies and then we'll just get rich. But that led to a ton of just crap science fiction movies, you know? So I don't know. I definitely bring in the sequel trilogy in my analysis because it's part of the 9-film saga, and I have an interesting relationship with the sequel trilogy, just in that I really, really enjoy the first 2 movies. And then the third movie I didn't like. It was the first Star Wars movie I ever saw I didn't like.
Interesting. Yeah.
But also in a way, you know, as a literary scholar, that doesn't matter. Like, if I like it or not, that's not my job. My job is to analyze it. And with that in mind, that episode 9 has so much in it that you can analyze. It's chock full of all kinds of stuff that is really interesting when you get down to thinking about it and looking at it, turning it over. And
I know you touch on the dyad between Rey and Kylo. So that's one right there.
Totally. Yeah. And that's an interesting instance. I'm glad you bring that up, because that's an instance where there's that documentary about the making of the film, and Chris Terrio, who obviously was the co-writer with J.J. Abrams.
Mm-hmm.
He's in there talking about how Joseph Campbell had this idea of a dyad in his work. And when I watched that and he said that, I was like, what? Like, I don't remember that in Joseph Campbell. And so that sent me on my little errand to try to track down what he was talking about.
Your own hero's journey.
Yeah. And then my hero's journey finally began, in 2020 during the pandemic. What does Chris Terrio mean? And yeah, there was, there's not a lot of great support for for Campbell, I should say, talking about that, about a dyad. He did mention duads in a few places, and he did talk about this idea called the sacred marriage, which comes out of alchemy and is also actually related to things that Jung worked on. So that was interesting. That was an interesting moment in working on this book, because it was like, okay, actually Jung had a lot more to say about that than Campbell did. And like Jung filled books about the sacred marriage and what he called the conjunctio of two becoming one. And he got super esoteric about it. And for him, it was an illustration of psychological transformation. And he really didn't wait for you to keep up in what he wrote about it. It's just dense and tricky stuff. But that was kind of an interesting idea. That was an interesting moment, because I was like, okay, Chris Terrio's talking about Joseph Campbell, but actually Jung is the one who said all kinds of stuff about this. So it really opened up what I could do with it, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Played right into your hand, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked out. It worked out.
Amazing. All right. Well, we should probably start to close things off, Steve. So we only got one more question for you before we start to wrap things up here. It's, if you could have a conversation with George Lucas about the mythological and psychological dimensions of his creation, what would be one question you would be most eager to ask?
Oh my gosh, that's such a huge, yeah, because my time would be super limited, wouldn't it? I'd be like, I only get one question here.
Very introvert. You gotta be quick, be efficient.
Yeah.
But with George,
Yeah,
if you get him on, if you get George going down a rabbit hole though, then you've got him. You know,
Right.
you got his attention.
Yeah. I would probably, I think I'd say, in your friendship that you developed with Joseph Campbell, what did he say about Jung in your presence? And just see if that ever came up.
Oh man,
he might be like, nothing. He didn't say anything, and then I'd be like, oh crap! I used my one question.
Yeah, nothing.
Who's Jung? Never heard of him.
Young who? Young Ling?
I my luck, I would ask something and get some like blank answer like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Nothing. He never brought him up. Yeah.
Nope.
Well, I mean,
I would love to know the answer to it though. Like,
I would.
I feel like it would have, considering like the concepts are so related.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Even Hereditary.
Definitely.
So
Yeah.
I would be curious.
I'd love to know.
And I mean, I guess, you know, that being said, I guess when this book is available, you know, we got to mail a copy to George, you know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally.
Definitely. Yeah, got to send it into the ranch, and someone will forward it from there. But you know, speaking of which, when exactly is your book available?
Well, the nice thing is that it was officially published 2 days ago, as of recording, and it landed in my lap. Physically, actual copies yesterday. I got home from work and there was a little box on my doorstep, and it had the book in it, 9 copies, and
that's awesome.
I was like, holy moly!
Oh, that must be a good feeling.
Here it is.
Yeah,
10
felt
years
pretty
of
good.
Labor and love.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, distilled into this book.
Yeah, well, congratulations then, and on the launch, and I guess. For documenting the date, I guess this would have been August 12th, 2025.
August 12th. That's right.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was out. Jung and Star Wars.
Big day. Yeah. So, you know, that'll end up on the Wikipedia, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh. I hadn't even thought of that. That's funny.
You got to make a page for it. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's amazing. I always love the stories where, you know, a Star Wars fan, you know, goes on to sort of almost give back to the fandom in a way, you know, like making something out of what they love. And, you know, with us, it's this podcast, you know, having these conversations with amazing people like you. And then there you are making books for much more intelligent people than myself when it comes to a lot of this stuff. But yeah, it's an awesome thing. And so yeah, we wish you the best. Congratulations on the book launch, and that's awesome news. So
Thank you, Josh and Blake, for having me. I love your podcast. I love what you do. You bring things up that blow my mind. There was a couple episodes ago. You were talking about just how the sheer preponderance of like new Star Wars material that comes out is like 236 publications in this year. Blah blah blah. I was just like, oh my gosh! Like, I'm glad you're on it. Yeah. You're on it, and please keep being on it because this is great.
Well, we do try, like you said. I mean, it's definitely a tsunami sometimes, full of lots of content.
Yeah.
Always coming. It's very hard to stay on top of sometimes, but we do our best.
Yeah. Well, you're doing great. You are doing great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I would probably say, where can people find
your
book?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a link through my website, which is www.sgellerhoff.com, and you should be able to order it through bookstores. It is available for pretty much anywhere. So,
all right. I'll put a bunch of links in the description, and if you want to send me any relevant links that you want down there too, we'll throw those down as well, and
maybe a link to your Boshak AI.
Yeah, yeah. We'll put that down there too if you have
it. Awesome.
The public release.
Yeah. So where can Star Wars fans find you on the internet when it comes to socials, if that's your thing?
Oh yeah, I'm around and about. My name everywhere is pretty much SG Ellerhoff. Right. So you can find me on Instagram, on the Blue Sky, on the Twitter, on the Threads. I'm around.
Awesome.
So thank you for that. And I look forward to hearing from people too.
Perfect.
That was part of why I wrote the book. It's like you said, give it back. I want to give this out into the world and people run with it. Read it, like it, disagree with it. Just spark conversation,
Yeah, engage with it. Yeah.
It's what it's all about.
Exactly. Yeah.
I foresee many book reports on this book.
Yeah. I want to see people research it. Yeah, use this as a reference. That'd be amazing. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve. It's been a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure having you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Cheers, gentlemen. Yes. Thank you. May the Force be with Jung.
May the Force be with Jung as well. And thank you again to Blake, our co-host here.
Thanks for having me. It's a good time.
All righty.
We'll see you out there. Keep flying.
All righty. May the Force be with you all. Of course, definitely go and follow Steve and hit him up with a question on one of his socials about the conversation today or about the book. Go and check out the links in the description. And as always, we will see you in the next episode of Star Wars Escape Pod.